Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Chicago Italian beef sandwich, stew meat edition. That's right, instead of using thinly sliced roast beef, I desecrated this classic Midwest sandwich by using stew beef, which may or may not have been a good idea. Although one thing I do know for sure, if you're around people from Chicago and they're watching this with you, they will not like this, just on principle. But anyway, we're not going to let that stop us, and we're going to move on to the first step, which is prepping the beef. Or as they say in Chicago, da beef. So right here I have about 1.5 pounds of beef stew meat, that is beef chuck, and we're going to go ahead and season that up with some salt and pepper. And by the way, I just bought a piece of beef chuck and cut it up like that myself to save money. But if you want to spend more and get a lower quality meat, just go ahead and buy the pre-cut stew meat at the butcher counter. Oh, they love when you do that. But I do recommend cutting your own. And once we have that seasoned, we're going to go ahead and sear that on high heat in a little bit of vegetable oil in some kind of heavy-duty pot or pan that has a lid. And like I said, we're going to brown this meat fairly well over high heat. And once we have that fairly well browned, we'll go ahead and add a whole bunch of garlic and spices and herbs, along with a little broth. And what we'll do is we'll just simply stew this until the beef is tender. And that's pretty much it. So once our meat's brown, we're going to go ahead and add a whole bunch of sliced garlic. We're going to want a nice big pinch of red pepper flakes, some more freshly ground black pepper, some dry oregano, some dry thyme, some dry rosemary. We're going to need some more salt. We're going to throw in a bay leaf. And then for the wet ingredients, I'm going to put in a little bit of white wine vinegar. A lot of people like to use a splash of wine in here, but I like the vinegar. And then we're going to go ahead and add enough chicken stock or chicken broth to cover. And then all we're going to do is bring this up to a simmer, reduce the heat, and stew it until it's tender. So in the original recipe, they'll make a roast beef, slice it thin, and add that back into the natural beef juices that they make with the roasting pan, which is very delicious. But here I was thinking, let's take some stew beef and cook it right in that flavorful broth and save a step. So that's the plan at least. So we're going to use standard stewing technique here. You can go ahead and leave your heat on high until it starts to bubble. And then of course we're going to back that heat down to low until we have a nice, steady, but very, very gentle simmer. And at that point, we're simply going to cover it and cook that for about 1 hour to 1.5 hours or until those chunks of meat are fork tender. Oh, by the way, people that think I'm cool, check out the socks and sandal combo. Oh yeah, that's a good look. Anyway, like I said, we're going to let that simmer slowly until it's fork tender. So when you think you're getting close, uncover it. And the best instrument for testing for fork tenderness is a fork. So I did a little test and I determined, yes, my meat is fork tender. And at that point, we're ready to divide and conquer. So I'm going to take a strainer, I'm going to separate the meat into a separate pot, along with a little bit of the juice. And I'm going to take a wooden spoon and I'm just going to break it up a little. I don't want this shredded like a pulled pork sandwich, which by the way was also one of the inspirations for this recipe. But I do want to break it up a little bit so it's easier to portion onto the rolls. So I'm going to work that over with the wooden spoon for a few seconds. And again, we're going to want to splash in enough juice to keep it very moist. And at that point, we're just going to cover that and keep it warm until we're ready to build our sandwiches. Okay, so our meat's ready. We're just going to reserve that until needed. And it's on to the final 2 phases, the juice and the vegetables. And for the juice, there's really not much to do. You can skim off some fat if you want. I did a little bit. And you're going to give that a taste, and it should be very, very strongly flavored, like spicy, salty, and very herby. But that's how it's supposed to be. This is not a soup. We're going to use that to soak our bread and to dip the sandwich into. So you want it strongly flavored. And you could strain this if you want, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to keep it hot like the beef until I'm ready to serve. So that's all set. And we're on to the last and final ingredient, the Giardiniera. Or Giardiniera, depends on what part of Chicago you're from. And all this is an Italian combination of mixed pickled vegetables. And all we're going to do here is chop that up into a relish. And we're going to use that to top our sandwich, and it is going to be fantastic. And of course, we should have made that homemade. But in fairness, the Italian beef sandwiches I've had in Chicago actually came topped with Giardiniera. So I think I'm okay here. And once our Giardiniera is chopped, we are ready to build our sandwiches. So step 1, you want to cut open some kind of crusty roll. You're going to want to drench it liberally with that garlicky, spicy, herby broth. I would go pretty much full saturation, and that's why you want to use something very crusty. Do not try this with white bread, please. It will not end well. So pretty much full saturation. Next up, we're going to top with a big spoon of that beautiful, tender, aromatic, delicious beef. And yes, a piece did fall on the floor. Thank you for asking. But the show must go on. And once we've laid down a slightly too generous portion of beef, we're going to top with an equally generous spoon of our pickled vegetables. And that beef stew version of Chicago Italian beef sandwich is done. So let's go ahead and cut that in half because this needs to be dippable. So make sure you cut it diagonally. That'll make it easier to dip. And as you know, people love pointy food. So we're going to throw that on a plate with a ramekin of piping hot, stewing liquid, beef juice, au jus, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to throw in a little Italian parsley just because I had it. And then it's time to taste. First, this stray piece. Actually, let me use a fork here so I can at least pretend to be civilized. Oh yeah, that's good. But anyway, forget the fork. Let's get in here and do this properly. What we're really supposed to be doing here is picking that sandwich up, dipping it in, letting it absorb some of that delicious and highly flavored broth. And we're going to eat that just like a classic French dip. Dip, bite, dip, bite, dip, bite. So anyway, there you go. Another one of my harebrained ideas. I tried to combine the Chicago Italian beef sandwich with the French dip sandwich, with sort of a little nod to the pulled pork sandwich. And the final verdict is, good sandwich. So with apologies to my friends in Chicago, I really do hope you give that a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.